My name is Garrett Reynolds, 32, and until last Tuesday, I thought I understood family disappointment. Then I received a letter from my dad that changed everything. Don't even try to come for the family reunion. We are cutting ties. The words burned into my brain as I stood in my San Francisco apartment, a world away from the construction business I was supposed to inherit. After a lifetime of disapproval, this final rejection shouldn't have hurt so much. I texted back one word. Understood. But what happened next would shake my entire family to its core. Before I dive deeper into this story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family pressure. Trust me, what happens after that simple, understood, text is something you won't want to miss. To understand why my father's letter hit me so hard, you need to know about the Reynolds family legacy. Reynolds Construction has been our family's pride for 3 generations. My grandfather Ryan Reynolds started the business in 1965 with nothing but a pickup truck and determination. He built it into a respected local construction company in suburban Maryland, handling everything from home renovations to small commercial projects. By the time my father Douglas took over in the 1990s, Reynolds Construction employed 30 people and had contracts throughout the DMV area. I grew up with sawdust in my hair and blueprints as placemats. Every summer from age 10, I'd be at job sites, first just watching, then holding lumber, eventually learning to handle basic tools. My father would put his hand on my shoulder and say, "One day, son, this will all be yours and your brother's." There was never a question about it. Reynolds men built things with their hands. That was our tradition, our identity. My mother Pamela was the quintessential construction wife, tough, practical, and completely devoted to my father's vision. She handled the office side of the business, managing payroll and scheduling while raising 3 kids. Whenever tensions rose between my father and me, she'd pull me aside and whisper, "Just do what your father wants, Garrett. It's easier that way." She never contradicted him, never suggested there might be another path for me. Then there was my older brother Blake, for years my senior and the perfect heir apparent. Blake took to construction like he was born with a hammer in his hand. By 16, he could frame a wall faster than some of the paid crew. My father beamed with pride watching Blake work, constantly telling everyone who would listen, "That boy's got Reynolds blood through and through." My younger sister Kimberly, 3 years behind me, somehow escaped the weight of family expectations entirely. As Daddy's little girl, she was free to pursue her interest in art and design. The double standard wasn't subtle. Kimberly got praise for her creativity while my interest in computers was treated like a phase that needed to be outgrown. High school changed everything for me. While Blake was already working full-time at the company, I discovered coding through a computer science class. Something clicked in my brain the first time I built a simple program. The logic, the creativity, the way you could build something from nothing but ideas that was construction, just in a different medium. I started spending lunches in the computer lab and joined the school's tech club. My father noticed my diminishing interest in weekend work at construction sites. "Computers are toys, Garrett," he'd say. "They won't put food on the table or give you the satisfaction of building something real." But to me, code felt more real than concrete. I could create solutions that helped thousands of people, not just one building at a time. The breaking point came during my senior year of high school. College applications were due, and I'd set my sights on computer science programs. My father had already enrolled Blake in a construction management degree at a local college, and he assumed I'd follow the same path. When I told him I wanted to study computer science at Stanford, the explosion was nuclear. "No son of mine is wasting his potential playing with computers all day," he shouted, his face turning that dangerous shade of red I'd come to fear. "The family business needs you. I need you. Is that worth nothing to you?" My mother stood in the corner of the kitchen, eyes down, saying nothing as usual. Blake watched from the doorway with a mixture of confusion and what might have been relief that the pressure wasn't on him for once. "I can help the business with technology," I argued. Construction companies need software solutions too. I could build systems to manage projects, track inventory. We've managed just fine with paper and pencil for 30 years. My father cut me off. This isn't about the business. This is about you turning your back on this family. The argument lasted for weeks. Eventually, my father issued an ultimatum. If I wanted any financial help with college, I'd have to major in something useful, like business or construction management. I refused to give up my dream. What happened next still impacts my life today. The family business was expanding, building a new headquarters and warehouse. My father needed a loan, and the bank wanted additional guarantors since the business had taken on several other large projects recently. As an 18-year-old with no credit history, I shouldn't have been valuable as a co-signer, but my father insisted I sign the paperwork. If you want any relationship with this family going forward, you'll sign, he said. It's the least you can do since you're abandoning the business. Confused, young, and desperate I worked 3 part-time jobs to put myself through a state university computer science program instead of Stanford. The distance between my family and me grew with every holiday I couldn't come home because I was working, every phone call that ended in argument, every achievement my parents didn't acknowledge. Blake joined the family business full-time after his construction management degree. Kimberly went to art school and became an interior designer, occasionally collaborating with Reynolds Construction on high-end projects. I was the outsider, the one who didn't fit the mold, the disappointment. When I graduated, despite the lack of family support, I threw myself into building my career in tech. After graduation, I landed an entry-level programming job at a small startup in San Francisco. The pay was modest, but the experience was invaluable. I lived in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, ate ramen most nights, and coded until my eyes burned. But for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who thought like me, who saw value in what I could create with my mind rather than my hands. Within 3 years, I had moved to a mid-sized tech company, doubling my salary and working on more complex projects. By year 5, I was leading a development team at one of the major tech firms. Year 7 saw me developing my own software solution for project management, ironically, something that would have greatly benefited Reynolds Construction had my father ever been willing to modernize. By the 10-year mark after college, I had founded my own software company, Raintech Solutions, a nod to the family name I still couldn't quite let go of. We specialized in logistics and project management software for construction and manufacturing industries. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd found a way to merge my family's world with mine, even if they couldn't see it. My San Francisco apartment reflected my success, a modern 2-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, minimalist furniture, and the latest smart home technology. It was worlds away from my parents' traditional suburban Maryland home with its overstuffed furniture and walls covered in family photos that increasingly excluded me. Through these years of building my career, Lauren Wilson came into my life. We met at a tech conference where she was presenting her work as a graphic designer. Smart, creative, and fiercely independent, Lauren understood ambition and the cost of pursuing your own path. She'd broken away from her family's expectations that she become a teacher like her mother and 3 aunts. Families have a blueprint for us before we're even born, she told me on our 3rd date. The bravest thing we can do is tear it up and draw our own. Lauren became my strongest advocate and confidant. She encouraged me to keep reaching out to my family despite the constant rejection, but also knew when to help me set boundaries. My best friend Jason Taylor was another crucial support through these years. We met in college when we were both working the late shift at a campus computer lab. Jason came from a warm, accepting family who practically adopted me, inviting me for holidays and treating me like one of their own. Through Jason, I learned what healthy family dynamics looked like. "Your family is messed up, man," Jason would tell me bluntly after hearing about my latest attempted reconciliation gone wrong. "You know that, right? Normal parents are proud when their kid builds a successful company from scratch." Every year, I'd make attempts to bridge the divide. I'd fly home for Christmas or Thanksgiving, bringing thoughtful gifts and trying to share my life with them. These visits inevitably ended in tension or outright arguments. "So you're still playing with computers?" my father would say dismissively as I tried to explain securing a major client or developing a new feature. "It's not playing, Dad. My company employs 35 people now. We're projecting $7 million in revenue this year." This was actually more than Reynolds Construction's annual revenue, though I never pointed that out directly. "Real work is done with your hands, son. You sit in an air-conditioned office all day while real men break their backs building things that will last." My mother would change the subject. Blake would look uncomfortable. Kimberly, to her credit, would sometimes try to defend me, but her interventions only made our father more stubborn. The only family member who showed genuine interest in my life was my grandfather Ryan. In his late 70s now and retired from the business, he would call me monthly to check in. We developed a ritual of meeting for lunch whenever I was in town, just the two of us, away from the family home. "Your father is stuck in his ways," Grandpa Ryan told me during one of these lunches. "But I want you to know I'm proud of you, Garrett. You're building something meaningful, just in a different way than I did." Those words meant everything to me, though we both knew he'd never say them in front of my father. Last Thanksgiving marked the worst blow-up yet. I just secured major venture capital funding to expand Rain Tech into international markets. When I mentioned it at dinner, trying once again to connect with my family through my achievements, my father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough about your computer games. No one wants to hear about how you sit around all day while other men do real work. Blake just secured the Westridge development contract, 15 new luxury homes. That's real achievement, real work that people can see and touch." I looked around the table. Blake stared at his plate, uncomfortable with being used as a weapon against me. My mother busied herself serving more mashed potatoes. Kimberly shot me a sympathetic look but stayed silent. Something in me snapped. 10 years of success, of proving myself, of extending olive branches, and nothing had changed. "My computer games built a multi-million-dollar company that helps construction firms like yours work more efficiently," I said quietly. "But you've never once asked to see what I actually do. You've never visited my office or met my team. You've never even downloaded the app one built specifically thinking of how it could help Reynolds Construction. We don't need your charity or your toys." I set down my napkin and stood up. "I'll get a hotel tonight. Merry Thanksgiving, everyone." As I packed my bag, my mother came to my room, wringing her hands. "Can't you just let it go, Garrett? You know how your father is." "That's the problem, Mom. I do know how he is, and I keep expecting him to change. That's on me, I guess." I didn't try to contact them after that disaster. For the first time, I accepted that perhaps some relationships couldn't be fixed, no matter how much you wanted them to be. Months passed without a word from anyone except Grandpa Ryan. Then, last Tuesday, the letter arrived. The envelope looked innocuous enough sitting in my mailbox, plain white with my father's neat block handwriting. I hadn't received an actual physical letter from my family in years. Our limited communication usually happened via terse phone calls or my mother's occasional text messages asking if I was eating enough. I opened it while making coffee, expecting perhaps a reluctant invitation to a family event, or maybe news about Grandpa Ryan's health. Instead, the single-page letter knocked the air from my lungs. "Garrett, after much consideration, your mother and I have decided it's best to formalize what has been true for years. You have chosen a path that rejects everything the Reynolds family stands for and values. Your continued disrespect for the family business and tradition cannot be overlooked any longer. Do not attempt to come to the family reunion next month. We are cutting ties with you officially and completely. Blake will be taking full ownership of the family business eventually, as he has proven his loyalty and commitment. You made your choice long ago. Now we are making ours. Douglas Reynolds." "No. Dear Garrett. No. Sincerely." Not even a dad signature. Just my father's full name, like a business correspondence to a troublesome vendor. I read it 3 times, each reading bringing a different emotion. First shock, then a deep, hollow hurt that radiated through my chest, and finally a slow-burning anger that made my hands shake. I picked up my phone and typed a dozen different responses, deleting each one. What could I possibly say? Beg for reconciliation? Defend my choices again? List my accomplishments as if that would suddenly change his mind? In the end, I sent a single word. Understood. Then I set my phone down and stared out my apartment window at the San Francisco skyline for what felt like hours. The finality of it all settled over me. After years of trying to maintain some connection while being true to myself, the decision had been made for me. I was officially excised from the Reynolds family. Lauren came over that evening and found me still sitting in the same spot, the letter on the coffee table in front of me. "Oh, Garrett," she said after reading it. "I'm so sorry. I should have expected it," I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "Nothing I've done has ever been enough." Lauren sat beside me, taking my hand. "Maybe this is a blessing in disguise. How many years have you spent trying to win their approval? The mental energy, the emotional toll, you can finally stop trying to fit yourself into their box." "It's not that simple," I said. "They're still my family." "Family is supposed to love you unconditionally," Lauren replied firmly. "They're not acting like family. They're acting like a cult that can't handle anyone thinking differently." My phone rang, Jason calling for our weekly catch-up. When I told him about the letter, his reaction was immediate and profane. "That's messed up, G. But honestly, this was news to me. Reynolds Construction has always been solid. They've weathered every recession. Things change, man. Construction is getting more competitive, and from what you've told me, your dad isn't exactly embracing new technology or methods." After we hung up, I couldn't stop thinking about what Jason had said. Why would my father formally cut ties now, after years of cold détente? Something wasn't adding up. I opened my laptop and began researching. Reynolds Construction's website hadn't been updated in 3 years. Their social media presence was minimal and poorly managed. Review sites showed recent complaints about project delays and communication issues, problems my software specifically addressed. Then I remembered something that had been in the back of my mind for years. That loan I'd co-signed at 18. I'd almost forgotten about it in the decade since, assuming it had been paid off or refinanced without me. But what if it hadn't? The next morning, I called Michelle Parker, an attorney who specialized in business law. After explaining my situation, her response was concerning. "If you co-signed a business loan and have never been formally removed from that obligation, you could still be liable for it," she explained. "Especially if the business is facing financial difficulties. Do you have a copy of the original loan document?" I didn't, but I knew who might. Grandpa Ryan had always been meticulous about keeping family business records. I called him immediately. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said, his voice sounding older and more tired than I remembered. "I heard about the letter. Grandpa, I need to know about that loan I signed when I was 18. Do you have the paperwork?" A long pause. "Yes, I do. Your father doesn't know I kept copies. Give me your email, and I'll scan it for you." The documents arrived an hour later. What I saw made my blood run cold. I hadn't just co-signed a specific expansion loan as I'd thought. I'd been added as a personal guarantor for the company's primary line of credit. If Reynolds Construction defaulted, my personal assets could be seized to cover the debt. A quick call to the bank confirmed my fears. Not only was I still listed as a guarantor, but Reynolds Construction had missed several recent payments, and the account was flagged for review. I spent the next day consulting with financial advisors and attorneys. The consensus was clear. I needed to remove myself from this liability immediately, especially given the formal severance of family ties. "Your father has done you a favor with this letter," Michelle explained. "It gives you clear justification for removing yourself as guarantor, since you've been explicitly excluded from the family and business." I sat with this information for a day, weighing my options. Part of me still hesitated to take action that might harm my family, despite everything. But another part, the part that had built a successful company through hard work and smart decisions, knew I needed to protect myself. On Thursday, I called the bank and began the process of removing myself as a guarantor on the Reynolds construction credit line. The bank representative explained they would need to notify the primary account holder, my father, of this change. "That's fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Please proceed." Then I waited, a knot of anxiety and resolve twisting in my stomach. Had I done the right thing? Was I being vindictive? No, I was protecting myself from a liability I never should have been saddled with in the first place, especially now that I'd been explicitly cut off from the family. The first call came exactly 36 hours later. My mother, her voice high and tight with panic. "Garrett, what have you done? The bank called your father. They're saying you've removed yourself from the business loan. There must be some mistake." "It's not a mistake, Mom. I received Dad's letter. You're cutting ties with me, remember? That includes financial ties. But you can't just. Garrett, you don't understand what this means for us." "I understand perfectly. You can't disown me personally but keep me financially bound to a business I've never been allowed to participate in." Her voice broke. "Please, you have to call the bank and tell them it was a mistake." "I can't do that, Mom. I'm sorry." More calls followed. Blake, uncharacteristically agitated. Kimberly, confused and caught in the middle. And finally my father, leaving voicemails that evolved from commanding to threatening to, surprisingly, pleading. By Saturday morning, I had 78 missed calls from my mother alone and a series of increasingly desperate emails from my father. The last one simply read, "We need to talk. This is about the survival of Reynolds Construction." I turned off my phone and went for a long walk along the bay, trying to sort through the tumult of emotions. For the first time in my adult life, I held power in my relationship with my family. It wasn't a position I had ever wanted, but here I was. The bank's process for removing a loan guarantor turned out to be more involved than I'd initially understood. While I'd submitted all the necessary paperwork, the final step required formal notification to all parties and a 7-day window for the business to secure alternative financing arrangements. During this time, Reynolds Construction would need to either find a new guarantor or demonstrate sufficient financial stability to maintain the line of credit without additional backing. I spent the weekend alternating between turning my phone off completely and checking the flood of messages from my family. My mother's calls had become hourly, each voicemail more tearful than the last. My father's emails shifted from demands to explanations that revealed more than he probably intended. "The business has faced some temporary setbacks." I maintained my silence, needing time to think clearly without the emotional manipulation I'd experienced my whole life. Lauren stayed with me, fielding calls from Jason and a few concerned friends who'd picked up on my unusual social media silence. "Whatever you decide, I support you," Lauren told me Sunday night as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset. "But remember who these people have shown themselves to be. They cut you off until they needed something from you." Monday morning brought a surprise. Blake was calling from the San Francisco airport. "I'm in town," he said when I finally answered. "We need to talk face to face. This isn't something that should be handled over the phone." Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain the protective distance I'd established. But Blake had always been the least antagonistic family member, caught in his own way between my father's expectations and his own desires. "Fine. My address is—" "I know your address," he cut in. "Dad made me look it up years ago. Just in case." That unsettled me. "In case of what?" "In case we needed to find you," Blake replied, his voice giving nothing away. "I'll be there in an hour." While waiting for Blake to arrive, I received a call from an unexpected source, Grandpa Ryan. "I owe you an apology, Garrett," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I've known about the business troubles for months but didn't tell you. I thought Douglas would work it out. How bad is it, Grandpa? I asked. Bad. Your father made some risky investments a few years back, took on projects that were too large for our operation. Then when the Westridge development stalled due to permit issues, it created a cash flow problem. He's been robbing Peter to pay Paul for at least 2 years. The revelation struck me like a physical blow. 2 years of financial struggles, and not once had anyone reached out to me, the family member who actually specialized in business efficiency and management systems. Did you know I was still on the loan documents? I asked. A long pause. Yes. I found out last year and told your father he needed to remove you since you weren't involved in the business. He said he would take care of it. Another pause. I should have followed up. I'm sorry, Garrett. The doorbell rang. Blake had arrived. I have to go, Grandpa. Blake's here. Be careful, son. Your brother's in a tough position. When I opened the door, I barely recognized Blake. My confident, easygoing brother looked like he'd aged a decade since I'd last seen him at Thanksgiving. Dark circles underlined his eyes, and his normally neat appearance was disheveled. You look terrible, I said, stepping aside to let him in. Yeah, well, finding out the family business might collapse tends to do that to a person. He entered my apartment and looked around, taking in the view and modern furnishings with a mixture of appreciation and resentment. Nice place. Computers must pay better than Dad thought. Blake, why are you here? He collapsed onto my couch, running his hands through his hair. The bank is threatening to call in the entire line of credit if we can't find a replacement guarantor by Friday. Dad's credit is overextended, Mom's is tied to his, and mine isn't strong enough on its own since I bought my house last year. And this is my problem because... Blake looked up sharply. Because it's the family business, Garrett. 3 generations of Reynolds men built this company. I'm aware. I was also explicitly informed Dad was angry when he wrote that letter. You know how he gets. I crossed my arms. I do know. I've known my entire life, which is why I built my own career away from his control. What I don't understand is why my name was still on those loan documents after more than a decade. Blake's expression shifted, guilt flashing across his features before he masked it. But I'd seen it. What aren't you telling me, Blake? Lauren chose that moment to emerge from the bedroom, where she'd been giving us privacy. Her timing was perfect, as Blake seemed to be searching for words. I'm Lauren, she introduced herself, extending a hand to my brother. I've heard a lot about you. All bad, I'm sure. Blake attempted a weak joke. Mixed reviews, Lauren replied with a small smile. Coffee? I was just about to make some. While Lauren busied herself in the kitchen, Blake seemed to gather his thoughts. The business has been struggling for a while, he finally admitted. The pandemic hit us hard, supply chain issues, project delays. Then Dad decided we needed to expand to compete with the bigger firms. He leveraged everything. And kept me on the hook without my knowledge, I added. Blake nodded reluctantly. Your signature on the original documents gave us a better interest rate. Your credit score has always been excellent. So Dad knowingly maintained a financial obligation in my name while simultaneously pushing me away from the family? The betrayal cut deep, even after everything. It wasn't just that, Blake said, his voice dropping as Lauren returned with coffee mugs. Dad had plans. What plans? Blake stared into his coffee. When your company started taking off, Dad had me research it. Revenue projections, client base, growth potential. He thought eventually we might be able to secure a larger loan using your business success as additional leverage. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You're telling me he was planning to use my success to bail out his business while continuing to treat me like a family disappointment? Blake couldn't meet my eyes. He called it bringing you back into the family business one way or another. Lauren placed a steadying hand on my shoulder as anger coursed through me. That's manipulation, not family. she said quietly. We even hired someone to do a deep dive on your finances. Blake continued, the confessions now pouring out. Dad wanted to know exactly what you were worth, what kind of collateral you could provide. Are you serious? That's borderline illegal. I know. Blake finally looked up, his expression torn between family loyalty and recognition of wrongdoing. I told him it was going too far, but you know how he gets when he's fixated on something. And now you're here because his plans fell apart when I removed myself from the loan. Blake nodded miserably. The business will go under without that line of credit. 35 employees will lose their jobs. The Reynolds name in construction will be finished. The weight of it all pressed down on me. Despite everything, I didn't want to see my family's legacy destroyed or innocent employees suffering. But I also couldn't allow myself to be manipulated and used any longer. I need time to think, I said finally. We don't have time, Blake replied desperately. The bank needs an answer by Friday. Then I'll have an answer by Thursday, I said firmly. That's the best I can offer right now. As Blake stood to leave, something shifted in his expression, the defensive family loyalty crumbling into something more vulnerable. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I've always been jealous of you. Jealous? Of the family outcast? Of your courage to leave. To build something that's truly yours. His voice cracked slightly. I never had a choice, Garrett. From the moment I could hold a hammer, my path was set. Sometimes I wonder who I might have been if I'd had your guts. The admission created a moment of genuine connection between us, perhaps the first since childhood. As brothers rather than competitors in our father's approval game. It's not too late to find out, I told him. Blake gave a sad smile. Maybe. But first we need to save what generations of Reynolds men have built. After he left, Lauren wrapped her arms around me. You okay? Not even close, I admitted. But I'm starting to see things more clearly than I have in years. Blake's unexpected visit and confessions left me reeling. The magnitude of my father's manipulation, maintaining my financial liability while rejecting me personally, researching my business with the intention of leveraging my success, even hiring someone to investigate my finances was almost too much to process. I spent the next day consulting with Michelle, my attorney, about the full legal implications of what I'd learned. This borders on financial fraud, she told me bluntly. Keeping you as a guarantor without your knowledge or consent for all these years, especially after you'd been effectively excluded from the business operations and decision-making, could potentially be actionable. I don't want to sue my family, I said. I just want to be free of this situation. Then we need to ensure your complete financial separation from Reynolds Construction. I'd recommend a formal legal agreement that not only removes you from the current obligations but prevents any future claims. While Michelle began drafting potential terms, I received another unexpected visitor. Blake had given Kimberly my address, and she arrived at my door Tuesday afternoon without warning. I had to see you, my sister said, hugging me tightly in a way she hadn't since we were teenagers. This whole situation is insane. Unlike Blake, Kimberly had always been somewhat shielded from the business drama as our father's favorite. Her perspective offered new insights. Mom's a complete wreck, she told me as we sat in my living room. Dad barely sleeps, just paces around the house making calls. Blake looks like he's about to collapse from stress. I'm sorry they're struggling, I said carefully. But I'm not responsible for the business decisions that led to this point. I know that, Kimberly surprised me by saying. This isn't on you, Garrett. Dad's been making increasingly risky business moves for years. The company's reputation isn't what it used to be. She hesitated, then added, There's something else you should know. When your tech company started becoming successful, Dad became obsessed with it. He has a file on his computer labeled Garrett's Company where he saves every article, every press mention. It's weird. Blake mentioned something similar, I said. Apparently, Dad was researching my business to potentially use it as leverage for loans. Kimberly looked uncomfortable. It went beyond that. He talked about ways to bring you back into the fold, his words. I always thought he meant reconciliation, but after Blake called me from the airport, I'm not so sure. What do you mean? A few months ago, I overheard Dad talking to his buddy at the bank. He was asking about ways to consolidate family assets even without all parties being initially cooperative. She met my eyes directly. I think he was looking for ways to gain some control over your company, Garrett. The revelation sent a chill through me. My father's rejection had never been about my career choice, it had been about control. When he couldn't control my path, he'd sought ways to control or benefit from my success instead. There's more, Kimberly continued reluctantly. Last year, someone tried to access your business banking information using Grandpa Ryan's personal details as verification. It triggered a security alert. Grandpa was horrified when he found out. He thought his identity had been stolen until Dad made a comment about family businesses sharing information. I felt physically ill. Dad tried to access my company's financial accounts using Grandpa's identity? Kimberly nodded miserably. I didn't connect it all until now. I'm so sorry, Garrett. I should have told you sooner. The pieces were falling into place, the letter-cutting ties arriving just as the business was facing a financial crisis, the desperate attempts to contact me after I removed myself from the loan, the years of emotional manipulation while maintaining financial entanglement. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Blake again. Dad's on his way to San Francisco, he said without preamble. He got on a flight this morning without telling anyone. Mom just found his note. He's coming here? To my apartment? The thought of confronting my father in my own space, without warning or preparation, sent my anxiety skyrocketing. Probably. I tried calling him, but he's not picking up. I thought you should know. I thanked Blake and ended the call, turning to Kimberly. Dad's on his way here. Her eyes widened. That's not good. When Dad feels cornered, he lashes out. You know that. I did know. I'd been on the receiving end of Douglas Reynolds' temper many times growing up. But I wasn't a child anymore, and this was my territory, not his. You should probably go, I told Kimberly. This isn't going to be pleasant. No way, my sister replied firmly. I've stood by silently for too long while Dad bulldozed over you. I'm staying. I called Lauren, who immediately left work to join us. Jason also insisted on coming over after I texted him about the situation. By the time my doorbell rang 3 hours later, I had a support system around me. When I opened the door, my father looked nothing like the imposing figure of my childhood. Douglas Reynolds appeared older, smaller somehow, the stress of financial worry etched into deep lines on his face. But his eyes still flashed with that familiar stubborn determination. We need to talk, he said, attempting to push past me into the apartment. I stood my ground. Hello to you too, Dad. Yes, you can come in. His jaw tightened at my assertiveness, but he nodded curtly and entered. His eyes widened slightly at seeing Kimberly, Lauren, and Jason all seated in my living room. This is a family matter, he said stiffly. These people are my family, I replied. The family I've chosen, who support me unconditionally. They stay. For a moment, I thought he might walk out. Instead, he sank into the one empty chair, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. The bank is calling in our line of credit, he said without preamble. Without your guarantee, they don't believe we have sufficient collateral or cash flow to maintain it. I'm aware of the situation. Then you know that the business your grandfather built, that I expanded, that your brother has dedicated his life to, will collapse without that credit line. I'm also aware that you kept me financially tied to that business without my knowledge while simultaneously pushing me away personally, I countered. And that you investigated my company with the intention of using my success to leverage more loans. My father's expression flickered surprise, guilt, then defensiveness. Who told you that? Blake? Kimberly? He shot an accusatory glance at my sister. Does it matter? It's true, isn't it? He leaned forward, hands clasped tightly. You don't understand business, Garrett. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions for the greater good. Don't patronize me, I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath. I run a successful tech company. I understand business perfectly well. What you did wasn't business, it was manipulation and potential fraud. Fraud? That's ridiculous. Your family. Am I? Because this letter suggests otherwise. I held up his letter, which I'd kept on my desk. You can't disown me personally while maintaining financial ties that benefit you. Lauren spoke up. Mr. Reynolds, did you ever intend to tell Garrett he was still liable for the business loans? My father's gaze shot to her. And you are? Lauren Wilson, Garrett's partner. This doesn't concern you. It absolutely concerns me, Lauren replied calmly. Financial entanglement affects both of us. You kept Garrett as a guarantor for over a decade without his knowledge. That's not just unethical, it's potentially illegal. My father's face reddened. Now listen here. No, you listen, I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. For years, you've made me feel like I was nothing because I chose a different path. You rejected my career, my choices, ultimately me, while secretly using my financial standing to benefit the business. Did you ever stop to think how your computer games comment might sound to someone who built a multi-million-dollar software company from scratch? The direct confrontation seemed to knock my father off balance. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, he didn't immediately counter with anger or dismissal. The business needed the guarantee, he said finally. And you abandoned the family legacy. I didn't abandon anything. I was pushed out for daring to have my own dreams. Dreams that, ironically, have been more financially successful than Reynolds Construction. Kimberly stepped in, her voice gentler than mine but equally firm. Dad, you have to admit that what you did was wrong. You can't have it both ways. Either Garrett is family and deserves respect for his choices and success, or he's not family and should be completely disconnected from the business financially. My father looked from Kimberly to me, then back again. Something shifted in his expression, the realization, perhaps, that his children were united against him, that his manipulation had been exposed. I never meant to, he began, then stopped. The business has always been everything to me. To our family. When you left, Garrett, it felt like betrayal. But watching your company grow while ours struggled, I guess I convinced myself that using your financial stability to help the family business was justified. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever received from him. You could have asked for my help, I said quietly. I would have given it freely if you treated me with respect instead of contempt. A heavy silence filled the room. Jason, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Mr. Reynolds, I've known Garrett for over a decade. He's the most loyal, hard-working person I know. He built his company while working 3 jobs to put himself through college because you withheld support. If you had embraced his talents instead of rejecting them, imagine how both your businesses might have thrived. My father had never been good at accepting criticism, but trapped in a room full of people speaking truth, something seemed to crack in his defensive armor. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. The business will collapse without that credit line. 35 families depend on Reynolds Construction for their livelihoods. I can't just put my name back on that loan, I told him. Not without significant changes. What changes? He looked up, a glimmer of hope breaking through the resignation. I need time to think about it, I said, and to consult with my attorney and financial advisors. This isn't a simple situation. My father nodded slowly, the fight gone out of him. As he stood to leave, he paused, looking around my apartment with new eyes. You've built a good life here, he said, an admission that must have cost him. Your grandfather always said you'd do something extraordinary. I should have listened to him. After he left, the emotional weight of the confrontation hit me all at once. I sank onto the couch, Lauren's arm around my shoulders. You stood your ground, she said proudly. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted. But for the first time, I think he actually heard me. Kimberly hugged me tightly. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner. That's changing from now on. As my support system rallied around me, I began to see a path forward, not one of simple forgiveness or easy reconciliation, but a path that honored both my family's legacy and my own worth and boundaries. The day after my father's unexpected visit, I met with Rebecca Foster, my financial advisor. I needed to understand all my options before making any decisions about Reynolds Construction. Financially speaking, the smartest move is to maintain your distance, Rebecca advised as we reviewed the business's precarious situation. Reynolds Construction has been mismanaged for years. Their debt-to-income ratio is concerning, and there are signs of cash flow problems that predate the current crisis. But if the business fails, 35 people lose their jobs, I said, including my brother and parents. Rebecca nodded sympathetically. I understand the emotional aspects, but I have to give you the financial facts. If you reattach yourself to this business in its current state, you risk your own financial health. The company needs significant restructuring and probably an infusion of capital to survive long term. What if I provided that capital as an... She considered this. That could work, but only with ironclad legal protections and significant changes to the business operations. You'd essentially need controlling interest to ensure your investment isn't squandered. I thanked Rebecca and headed to meet Lauren for lunch, my mind churning with possibilities and concerns. You're considering helping them, aren't you? Lauren asked over salads at our favorite cafe. I'm considering it, I admitted. Lauren reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Just remember, boundaries aren't just about saying no. Sometimes they're about saying yes, but on your terms. Whatever you decide, it needs to protect you financially and emotionally. What would you do? I asked. Honestly, I'd make sure any help came with conditions that prevent future manipulation. Real change, not just promises. Her wisdom, as always, helped clarify my thinking. This wasn't about revenge or even justice, it was about creating a healthy path forward that honored both my family connections and my own boundaries. As I walked back to my apartment, my phone pinged with an email from Kimberly. Garrett, I found something you should see. Dad's been hiding the true extent of the business problems from everyone, even Blake. Some of the company equipment is being repossessed tomorrow. The situation is worse than anyone realized. Also, I've been thinking about my own role in all this. I've enabled Dad by staying silent for too long. That changes now. Call me when you can. Love, Kim. I called her immediately, and what she told me confirmed my growing suspicions. My father had been hiding financial problems for years, taking increasingly risky contracts to maintain the appearance of success, and leveraging every available asset, including my unwitting guarantee, to keep the business afloat. That evening, Jason organized an impromptu gathering at my apartment. He arrived with pizza and beer, followed by Lauren and 2 other close friends who knew about my family's situation. Consider this an intervention, Jason announced. Not for you, for us. We're worried we might be too biased against your family given everything they've done. We want to make sure you make this decision for the right reasons, not out of guilt or obligation. For the next few hours, my support system helped me talk through every aspect of the situation. They challenged my thinking, offered different perspectives, and most importantly, reminded me that whatever I decided, they had my back. The way I see it, my friend Mia offered, this could be an opportunity to transform your relationship with your family on your terms. Not by caving, but by leading. By midnight, clarity had emerged from the chaos of emotions and options. I knew what I needed to do. The next morning, I called Michelle, my attorney, and outlined my plan. She helped me draft a detailed proposal that would address the immediate financial crisis while establishing clear boundaries and expectations going forward. "This is comprehensive and fair," Michelle said after reviewing the final document. "It protects your interests while offering a viable path forward for Reynolds Construction. Are you sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure," I said. "It's time to redefine my relationship with my family, not by cutting ties or by falling back into old patterns, but by creating something new." With the proposal finalized, I called a meeting at a neutral location, a conference room in Michelle's office building. I asked that all key family members attend: my father, mother, Blake, Kimberly, and Grandpa Ryan if his health permitted. To my surprise, they all agreed without argument. The financial situation had become dire enough that even my father's pride couldn't stand in the way. Thursday morning found us all seated around a polished conference table, tension thick in the air. My mother looked like she hadn't slept in days. Blake's professional demeanor couldn't hide his anxiety. Kimberly sat tall, a new determination in her posture. Grandpa Ryan, despite my concerns about his health, appeared the most composed of all. My father, uncharacteristically, kept his eyes down, examining his hands clasped on the table. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I've spent the past few days consulting with financial and legal advisors about Reynolds Construction's situation. I've also done a lot of soul-searching about my relationship with this family." I placed copies of my proposal in front of each person. "This document outlines the terms under which I'm willing to help save the family business." My father's head snapped up, surprise and the beginning of hope in his expression. "The first section addresses the immediate financial crisis. I'm prepared to provide a capital investment of $2 million to stabilize the business and satisfy the bank's requirements for maintaining the credit line." A collective exhale of relief rippled through the room. "However," I continued, "this isn't a blank check or an unconditional guarantee. The remaining sections outline the changes that must occur for this investment to proceed." I gave them a moment to scan the document before summarizing the key points. "First, a complete financial audit by an independent firm I'll select. Second, a restructuring of the management team to include professional, non-family executives in key positions. Third, implementation of modern project management and financial tracking systems which my company will provide at cost." My father's expression had darkened, but he remained silent. "Fourth, a new operating agreement that clearly defines roles, responsibilities, and financial obligations. No one family or otherwise will be financially liable without their explicit, informed consent. Fifth, I will hold a 30% ownership stake with voting rights proportional to that investment." I took a deep breath before continuing. "Finally, and this is non-negotiable, we will all participate in family counseling to address the patterns of communication and control that have damaged our relationships for years." My mother gasped softly. My father's jaw tightened. Blake looked thoughtful. Kimberly nodded approvingly. Grandpa Ryan smiled. "I know this proposal represents significant change," I acknowledged. "Change is difficult, especially when a business has operated the same way for generations. But without these changes, Reynolds Construction will fail not just financially, but as a legacy worth preserving." I looked directly at my father. "Dad, this isn't about taking control away from you. It's about bringing Reynolds Construction into the modern era with the best of both worlds, your construction expertise and my business systems knowledge. It's about building something together instead of pulling each other apart." My father was silent for a long moment, his internal struggle visible in the working of his jaw, the furrow of his brow. Finally, he looked up. "You drive a hard bargain," he said, his voice gruff but not angry. "But I can see you've put thought into this. I'll need time to review the details. The bank needs an answer by tomorrow," I reminded him gently. Grandpa Ryan spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of family history. "Douglas, your son is offering you a gift, not just financial salvation but a chance to heal this family. Don't let pride stand in the way of both." My mother reached for my father's hand. "Please, Douglas. For all of us." The room fell silent as my father considered the proposal, flipping through the pages with deliberate care. When he finally looked up, something had shifted in his expression. "I built this company to last generations," he said slowly. "If ensuring that means accepting help and new ideas, then I'll agree to these terms." The relief in the room was palpable. Blake extended his hand across the table to me, gratitude in his eyes. Kimberly wiped away tears. My mother's smile trembled with emotion. "I'll have the formal agreements drawn up immediately," Michelle said, having remained a silent professional presence throughout the meeting. As we prepared to leave, my father approached me somewhat awkwardly. "Your grandfather always said you had the Reynolds determination, just channeled differently. I'm starting to see what he meant." It wasn't an apology or a complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning, a turning point from which something new could grow. The first few weeks after our agreement were far from smooth. My father initially balked at the financial audit, calling it an unnecessary invasion, until the accountants uncovered significant issues that even he hadn't been fully aware of. The business had been operating on razor-thin margins for years, with per-tracking systems allowing costly inefficiencies to continue unchecked. "This is worse than I thought," he admitted during one tense meeting, looking genuinely shocked at some of the findings. "How did we let it get this bad?" "Because you refused to modernize," Blake said, surprising everyone with his bluntness. "We've been doing things the same way for so long that we couldn't see the problems anymore." The revelation seemed to crack something open in my father. His initial resistance to the management restructuring diminished as the audit revealed just how dire the situation had been. When I brought in a respected construction industry consultant to help reorganize operations, he actually listened to her recommendations. My mother, after decades of quiet support for my father's decisions, found her voice in unexpected ways. During a particularly heated discussion about financial transparency, she finally stood up to him. "Enough, Douglas," she said firmly when he began dismissing concerns about his previous handling of business finances. "This secrecy and stubbornness nearly cost us everything. Garrett is offering us a chance to save not just the business but our family. It's time to listen instead of command." The shock on my father's face at my mother's assertiveness quickly gave way to a grudging respect. It was the first of many small but significant shifts in their relationship dynamic. The family counseling sessions were perhaps the most challenging aspect of our agreement. Sitting in a comfortable office with Dr. Wilson, a family therapist specializing in business families, we began the painful process of unpacking decades of expectations, disappointments, and communication failures. "I felt like nothing I did was ever good enough," I admitted during one session. "That's why I had to leave to find out if I could be enough for myself. And I felt abandoned," my father countered, the admission clearly difficult for him. "Like everything I built, everything I valued, meant nothing to you." "It wasn't about rejecting what you built, Dad," I explained. "It was about needing to build something of my own." These conversations were uncomfortable, sometimes tearful, and occasionally heated. But slowly, session by session, we began to understand each other's perspectives in ways we never had before. Meanwhile, the business transformation was underway. We implemented RainTech as project management system, trained the staff on new procedures, and brought in a professional CFO with construction industry experience. The efficiency improvements were almost immediate. Projects that had been stalling began moving forward, costs came down, and client satisfaction increased. Blake thrived in the new environment, stepping into a role that leveraged his hands-on construction knowledge while freeing him from the administrative burdens he'd never enjoyed. He called me late one night, about 2 months into the changes. "I need to thank you," he said, sounding more relaxed than I'd heard him in years. "For the first time since joining the company, I actually enjoy coming to work. I'm doing what I'm good at instead of struggling with what Dad thought I should be good at." Kimberly found her place in the reorganized business too, heading up a new interior design division that complemented the construction services and added a valuable revenue stream. Her creativity, long appreciated but never fully utilized, became a competitive advantage as we pursued higher-end projects. The most profound changes, however, were in my relationship with my parents. My father's initial resentment of my involvement gradually transformed into a reluctant respect, then genuine appreciation as the business stabilized and began to grow again. During a site visit 6 months after our agreement, he actually asked my opinion on implementing a new technology solution. "You understand this digital stuff better than I do," he said, the admission clearly costing him some pride but offered willingly. "What do you think would work best here?" My mother and I rebuilt our relationship more quickly. Years of silent support had given way to a new assertiveness on her part, and she seemed determined to make up for lost time. "I should have stood up for you," she told me during a private lunch. "I was so focused on keeping peace that I didn't fight for what was right. I won't make that mistake again." The company's 1-year anniversary under the new structure coincided with Grandpa Ryan's 80th birthday. We held a celebration at his favorite restaurant, the entire family together for the first time without tension hanging over us like a storm cloud. As we raised glasses to toast the patriarch who had started it all, Grandpa Ryan looked around the table with satisfaction. "When I built my first house, I never imagined all this," he said, gesturing to encompass not just the family but the legacy we were continuing in different ways. "A construction company still going strong 3 generations later. A cutting-edge technology firm created by my grandson. Most importantly, a family that finally learned how to bend without breaking." My father stood, somewhat hesitantly. Public emotional displays had never been his strong suit. "I want to say something," he began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "A year ago, I thought I was losing everything I'd worked for. The business was in trouble, and I made the mistake of pushing away the very person who could help save it." He looked directly at me. "Garrett, you've proven me wrong in all the best ways. You showed that there's more than one way to be a Reynolds builder. You've built a successful company, and now you've helped rebuild this family. I'm proud of you, son. I should have said that a long time ago." The words I'd waited decades to hear washed over me, healing wounds I'd carried so long they'd become part of my identity. It wasn't a perfect resolution. My father was still learning to communicate, still struggling with control issues, still occasionally falling into old patterns. But it was real progress, hard-won and genuine. Later that evening, as Lauren and I walked along the waterfront near my apartment, she asked what I was thinking. "I'm thinking about what success really means," I told her. "For so long, I measured it by my father's approval, first by seeking it, then by rejecting the need for it. But true success isn't about approval at all. It's about building a life that reflects your values, surrounded by people who respect your boundaries and appreciate your worth." "And have you found that success?" she asked, squeezing my hand. I thought about the thriving family business now operating with professional management and transparency. About my own company continuing to grow and innovate. About my brother and sister finding their authentic places in the family enterprise. About my parents, slowly but surely, learning new ways of relating to their adult children. About the boundaries I'd established and maintained, even while rebuilding relationships. "I think I have," I said. "Not because everything's perfect, but because I finally know my own worth with or without anyone else's validation." As I look back on the journey from that devastating letter to where we are today, I realize the most important lesson wasn't about business or family dynamics, but about self-worth and boundaries. Sometimes the people who should love us unconditionally place conditions on that love. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't walking away, but standing your ground and requiring others to meet you as an equal. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family or stand up for your own worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics and finding your own path. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to demand respect and set boundaries, even with family. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, Your worth isn't determined by anyone's approval but your own.